So I've just returned from a trip and I was about to unpack my bag, but I figured this would be a good opportunity to go over some of the things I brought with me and how I pack them. Nowadays, I've become a lot more strategic because I want to bring all these little things so I can get different shots and not have to miss out on anything. But at the same time, I'm trying to meet a lot of these weight requirements for airlines and size requirements. So I've definitely had to scale down my kit, not necessarily in quantity of things I bring, but in weight and size. So I've made a lot of changes. The first thing I want to talk about is my bags. I usually bring a suitcase that just has all of my clothes. It was about a carry-on size suitcase this time because we were jumping through different airlines. I was gone for about 22 days and I went to Australia and New Zealand. So there are a lot of short, small flights in between, which meant I had to use my carry-on space very wisely, because on some of those smaller flights, I was using my backpack as my carry-on, but on the long haul flights, I was able to use it as my personal item and put my suitcase up above. So let's talk first about this bag. This is my backpack. It's my main camera bag for when I travel. It's made by Shimoda. I got this one at a camera store used for like 50 bucks, so it was an absolute steal. I didn't really realize how great of a bag it was until after a little while. I actually ran into someone who had the same bag and they started bragging about it to me, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe it is a pretty solid bag. And it's very weather sealed, which is nice because I like to go to a lot of places where there's waterfalls and different climates, so it's good to keep your stuff protected. And the thing I love about it the most is how customizable it is. There's so many different pockets. And I actually recently purchased a bunch of different pouches and stuff from Shimoda that go along with this bag to keep everything organized and compartmentalized, because when you're going through all these different security checkpoints, they want to rip everything out of your bag. So it's really nice if you could just keep all of the stuff, like all your batteries and stuff, in one spot so that they don't have to tear everything apart and you have to put every individual item together. Instead, you can kind of just put these packages back together and reassemble your bag pretty easily and not have to be stressed. But yeah, I do have a couple of other items from Shimoda. I got these stuff sacks that I've been using for like dirty clothes or dirty sneakers, or sometimes camera gear as well. Like if there's a whole bunch of items I know TSA is gonna wanna look at, like batteries and film, put them all in one pouch and throw it through so that they can just deal with that. I don't have to worry about them going through the entire bag. And while I was gone, actually, this arrived, which is the actual insert for the bag. Like I said, I bought the bag used, so there was no insert in it, and I've been using like an old insert from another camera bag, but it's not a great fit, so we'll go through that in a second. But you'll see on top here, I have my FPV drone. This is how I transport it to keep it safe. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, this is the Shimoda bag. There's a bunch of different pouches. We'll start here on the front. You can see there's 2 individual zipper pouches in there. So these guys, I'll store small items, like this is my wrench for my FPV drone. There's some different size Allen wrenches in there for either like my capture clip or mounting a GoPro to the FPV drone. And then I have my memory card case, which keeps all of my blank memory cards, my ready to format memory cards, and some micro SDs. And then I also have an extra Z battery. This is just another Allen wrench. So deep in here, if you can see, here's my GoPro. This I'll bring for pretty much every trip now because I just always want to have the option to do either underwater or put it on my FPV drone. This is like my main camera for FPV. It's got an ND filter on there right now, but I also bring some extra filters. There's clear filters and different densities of neutral density. And then there's also like a nice divider here. So you can kind of go all the way down in here, and I keep my props in there so that they're not stabbing into anything. So I always bring 2 sets of props at least. Obviously I take them off for transport so they're not getting damaged or damaging or cutting anyone. And I think that's everything I have in here for the most part. But yeah, this is a nice little easy access spot to keep things that you need but also need to keep protected. There's also a lot of these little mounting points in here, which I really love. I'll show you a couple more of them. So next we have these side pockets. These both have like 2 stages to them. This one has this smaller pouch, which also has a water bottle holder in it that you could fold out, which is really nice. And I just keep like a pen in there. And then this is my sensor cleaning brush. It's the Arctic Butterfly by Visible Dust. Highly recommend this. I've talked about this a bunch but it's just for cleaning sensors on the go. It's not like the same as a wet clean, but at least if you have just some dirt and debris on there, you can get it off quickly without having to damage your sensor. It's super handy and I highly recommend it. And then you can open up this side more and you actually have access to the rest of the bag. So it's nice for like if you want to grab your camera out, but like I said, I haven't had that insert in there yet, so I just keep some stuff stashed in here. Talk about that later. Move on to this other side here. We got a similar setup where there's just a little zipper pouch. I don't think there's actually anything in there except for the water bottle holder right now. And then in here, I just have my laptop charger for my MacBook Pro. This one you can tell is a little bit more organized. You have a few more options in there of what you want to do with it. Moving on, if we flip the bag over, there's actually some pockets right on the front here. This one I'll usually keep my wallet in. It's nice that it zips because I can keep things in there that are important that I need access to, my AirPods or my wallet while I'm traveling. And then on this side, I'll usually keep like my passport or my phone, anything that I need immediate access to, sometimes extra batteries even. This one's a little bit bigger, you can see, so you can get away with, I think it's meant to hold even like a small water bottle. And then this is the Peak Design capture clip. This is something that I will always bring with me now. It's been so many times where I've wanted to film something, but my camera's in my backpack and it's kind of a hassle, especially when you're traveling or jumping around from place to place. You don't want to have to break things down or build things out. So it's nice that you can just keep your camera ready to be used. And that's something that I've really learned over the years, is keeping your setup smaller and more convenient rather than something that's going to get in the way and make it harder to film things, at least for travel filmmaking. Like obviously my full-time job is video production, so we bring whatever we need and take as much time as we need. But when it comes to travel filmmaking, you don't always have that extra time. You oftentimes are shooting on the fly or capturing moments as you go. So it's really important to be able to be quick and have things that are accessible. The next area on this bag here is the roll top, which is my favorite part because I can throw my rain jacket in there or anything that like day of that I'm using when I'm traveling. Oftentimes I'll put like extra hats in there or like socks, and it doesn't really take up much more space. Right now we got this LiPo bag, we'll talk about that in a second. And then I always bring my headphones. These are over-ear headphones. I often use these for editing, but for plane rides, I really dislike being on the plane, so this really helps me zone out and listen to like an audiobook or music or movies. Actually, on my last plane ride, I watched like, I think 10 movies on the way to Australia, which is crazy. I haven't watched that many movies in years. Okay, so also in the roll top, I keep this rain cover. This is a reusable rain cover from Peak Design. It's called the Shell. I originally bought it for my S1H, so it's a little bit larger than my current camera setup, but it works great, and I often am using larger lenses, so it works out. It has a lot of good access points, and it's just nice to have a reusable one because the plastic ones are great, but sometimes they rip or get damaged, and then you're kind of SOL. This really comes in handy. I've used it on like every trip, especially this time we were in New Zealand. One day we were just absolutely getting poured on. We were on a cruise for seeing waterfalls, and I don't think I would have gotten any footage if it wasn't for this thing. All right, so in here, you can probably see down in there, there are some zipper pouches to allow you to further divide things up. I have in here my FPV radio. This is the TBS Tango 2. This was a newer purchase. I wanted to still be able to fly FPV, but not have to bring as much stuff or as large of items. So I recently switched over to Crossfire, which has been great so far. This thing's a lot smaller and very reliable. I've had some issues with the old DJI FPV radio, but I kind of had to make a decision whether or not I was going to continue to travel with FPV gear, and it's so enjoyable for me that I really wanted to figure out a way where I could bring my FPV stuff and not have it take up so much space to the point where I feel like I'm missing out on bringing other stuff. So this has been a big upgrade for me. Also, these are really nice gimbals, and these joysticks fold in, so you don't have to worry about destroying the gimbals while you're traveling. And you can tell I keep it in that roll pouch just because I feel like it's a little bit safer up there. And then also in here is another item that I largely debated on bringing, which is a gimbal. And for those who know me, you know I've kind of gone back and forth with bringing a gimbal for a long time. Sometimes I feel like they're just too cumbersome and they get in the way more than they do add to your trip and your video. But there's so many opportunities that I don't want to be missing out on, where I'm like, oh, I really wish I could add some camera movement. And having a gimbal really, it is a very versatile tool. But recently I've pared my setup down, I'll talk about it a little bit more, to the point where I could bring the RS3 Mini, because I originally bought this intending on using it with the A7S III and the 24-70 as it's advertised, but it's just too difficult. It's too heavy of a payload, and if you like don't balance it perfectly or you want to change focal lengths even a little bit, you're going to end up rebalancing it. And that's what I don't want to deal with, is just a gimbal becoming more of a time waster than it is a tool. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. But also in here we have the little tripod for it, which actually sometimes I'll use this as a tripod itself, but for the most part it's just for the gimbal. And then I have some hiking accessories like this flashlight slash battery pack, which is nice to have just because you never know when you're going to need a little bit of extra light and you don't want to waste your phone battery. And then I also have just a cheap little headlamp, again, just for if I'm shooting at night and I need a little bit of light. It worked great when I was doing some astrophotography in New Zealand. And then I also have a bunch of these microfiber cloths in this bag, just so that when my lens gets wet or dirty, I can quickly and easily fix that. So we'll roll this back up for now. And I'll flip the bag over to the main access point. Most of these hiking bags you'll find open from the back like this. It's really nice because if you want to set your bag down to get stuff out, you don't get your back all wet. And these zippers feel great, nice and robust. And also it has a waist strap, which is a huge plus for me. It's basically a necessity at this point because these bags get so heavy that you're walking around with it all day and it ends up really becoming painful. So in here, there's a laptop sleeve. This is where I keep my M1 MacBook Pro. This is the original M1 MacBook Pro from I think 2020 maybe. It's the 13-inch. I knew I wanted something small because I went back and forth on whether I would even bring a laptop or not, but I've just had so many issues where I've needed to do something with a card or plug into Betaflight or update something from DJI that you pretty much need a laptop in my opinion, but mostly for importing. But oftentimes when I'm on these trips, honestly, I'm like answering emails and stuff too. So it's important to have this with me, and allows me to make sure that I'm able to actually use all the equipment I brought. Especially this time around, I had a new quad, so I was running Betaflight a lot and fixing things, which if I didn't have my laptop, I probably wouldn't have been able to fly at all. So these are some of the little pouches I was talking about that I bought recently from Shimoda. I was just testing them out, kind of seeing what I want to do with them. This one is the travel pouch, I think. But this one I just kept some cables in, GoPro batteries, antennas for my FPV drone. Again, it's really nice that it's all compartmentalized. It makes it a lot easier when you're repacking this bag to keep everything in order. And that way, if you take it out, you know that it has to go back in and everything makes it back in. We also have this travel pack. This one, I think it's a little more simple. It's just a 2-stage one. I like that it's clear though, so you can see what's in there. But I keep in there my 82mm variable ND 2 to 5 stops from Polar Pro. And then also an 82mm quarter Pro Mist from Tiffin. And those I also have stepping rings for, so I can go on to pretty much any lens I bring. I'll be able to step down or up, actually just step down. And then I also have a small little ND filter on there, or in here. And I also bring a small Pro Mist filter as well, so that my smaller lens setups, I don't have to step all the way from 49 to 82, I can just go to 49. And I like doing Pro Mist and ND separately because that way, if I'm inside, I can still have Pro Mist. I know there's a lot of those ND Mist combos, I have a few of them, but sometimes you don't need ND, so, and you don't want to be having some shots with Pro Mist and some shots without. It's just weird. And then also I have, again, from the top pouch, this is the LipoSafe bag. I like to bring this bag in particular because it kind of shows TSA that you know what you're doing and that you're keeping your battery safe. Plus it's technically, I think, required. And then I keep these 6S lipos in there. This was my first time flying with the 6S drone. And it's important that you make sure you're under the watt-hour capacity I had a couple of TSA agents look at it, and they all looked for the watt-hour number, and that's what they went by to see whether or not I could bring it with me. And again, this is all in my carry-on bag. It's important to keep it all in your carry-on bag. So yeah, these are 3,300 milliamp hour batteries for my FPV drone. Great to have that extra flight time. It was my first time, like I said, flying with a 6S drone, so it was a different experience overall. And then we got in here my daily driver drone. This is the Mavic 3 Classic. This is the one I used the most while I was gone. I used it for a lot of photo and video, and I only brought one battery with me, and I would actually just charge up in between flights, or I would just run one battery the whole day. I was usually only flying for like 10 minutes at a time. If I was doing a hyperlapse, maybe like 15 minutes. And then I would just charge it back up periodically. I might get another battery soon, but honestly, that worked out pretty great for me and didn't really have any issues, and it kept my amount of batteries I had to bring down a little bit. Then I also have a separate pouch that I keep it in. This is just a lens pouch, but honestly, that's just such a good way to pack for me, is keeping all of these things like individually wrapped and not having to bring all of their own original cases. Also brought the remote for it. This is just the standard DJI remote. I was a little skeptical at first because it's so small and there's no antennas, that I was really worried about the range of it. I'm used to the Smart Controller, which is like the nicer remote for the Air 2S. But honestly, this was pretty solid. I really want to get the new smart remote. I think it's called the RC Pro for the Mavic 3 series. But this was fine for now. And I'm already bringing my phone anyways. My phone has a pretty good screen. It's an iPhone 12 Pro. So this definitely saved me on space. Even if I did have the RC Pro, I don't know that I would use it for travel as much as I think I would, just because extra weight, extra components to bring, extra batteries to charge. So yeah, this was nice. And then I also have in here my DJI Goggles 2. I just upgraded from the Goggles V2, again, just to keep things smaller. But also the new quad I bought has a 03 air unit, so it's a little bit easier to use these with a newer air unit. I know you can use them with the older air units, but there's been some compatibility issues. But honestly, I pretty much had this purchase planned out. I knew I was gonna wanna get into a new drone pretty soon because I've been experimenting a lot with 3-inch drones and 5-inch drones, and I knew that for what I wanna do, the shots I wanna get, I was looking at more of like a slightly larger quad. I didn't wanna go all the way to 7-inch just because I felt like that was going to be a little bit more cumbersome than I really wanted. I don't need like a ton of power. I just need to be able to go a little bit further than I want. Like my 5-inch drone honestly doesn't go that far. And when I brought it to Scotland, it was really fun and I was able to get a couple of the shots I wanted, but anytime I got a little bit further away, I just felt like iffy about it. I felt like it wasn't going to come back. And it didn't have GPS, where the drone I brought this time, this is the BOB57 from iFlight. And again, I have the TBS Crossfire Nano receiver, as well as the 03 air unit, which I'm pretty stoked to get some better range out of. The antennas are a lot longer, there's 2 of them. It has GPS, so it can do return to home. And overall, it's just a better quad for the types of shots I wanna get, especially with the GPS. That's huge. I know a lot of people think that GPS is just for the DJI drones, but honestly, I would prefer something like this where I can still fly full manual and have all the control I want, use Betaflight, customize the drone as much as possible, and also have the advantages like GPS. So yeah, this is the new quad setup. I'm still experimenting with it. If you guys want to see more about this one, I haven't seen a lot of information out about it. So let me know, I can do some videos about it as I experiment with it more and more. And then I also have in here 20mm f1.8, and we'll get into the camera systems I brought. The reason they're not in my bag is because, like I said, this ZV-E1 was my main camera, and this just lived on the capture clip most of the time. If I needed to stow it away, I would just throw it in the top loader. But this I had with the 28 to 60mm lens. This is the kit lens from the A7C, and it's a pretty decent lens. It collapses down to be nice and small. It's f4 to 5.6, which honestly at first I was kind of turned off by that, but because I was mostly shooting landscapes, I was already at 5.6. And the one thing I want to mention is my girlfriend also is a photographer, so she brought her A7R4 and the 24 to 70 version 2, which is a 2.8, and the 70-200 2.8. So if she wasn't using one of those, I could also use one of those lenses. But for the most part, I use the 28-60 quite a bit just because it worked well on the gimbal and it worked well on the capture clip so that I could quickly and easily have my camera at the ready. And honestly, the autofocus is pretty good. It's a pretty sharp lens overall. So you guys let me know what you think, but this was my main setup, really. And the ZV-E one, I wasn't really planning on bringing. I bought it as like a backup for our A7Ss back at work. But because I'm trying to get down to just having less stuff, less weight overall, and the image quality is really no different. I was able to upgrade this. I saw on Sony's website, you can basically type in a code and it gives it 4K 120, 10-bit 422, the same exact codec that the A7S shoots, and 1080 240, and then you also have 4K 60 and 10-bit 422, 4K 24 10-bit 422. So honestly, it has everything that I'm looking for. And it does have some other features that I want to talk about in a later video. I might do just a video review on the ZV one, honestly, because it's basically could replace my A7S. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. I think it's just going to be kind of like my travel cam for now. And when I can bring the A7S, problem is sometimes when you're traveling, you have more flexibility. Like if you're doing a road trip or something, I would definitely bring an A7S just because I like the extra weight it has. I like the viewfinder. But for traveling internationally and going on lots of small planes, this saved me a lot of weight and space, and with little to no sacrifice in image quality or anything like that. And then I also brought this 20mm f1.8. This one I used more for like night photography. It's a lot faster. But I also sometimes just kept it on the ZV-E one and used it as like a vlogging lens because it's so wide and fast. You can get shallow depth of field, and this was kind of my alternative to my 16-35 I would typically bring, which honestly the 16-35 and the 24-70 feel so big on the ZV-E one that it's a little bit uncomfortable. That's probably the one downside to the ZV-E one. I also packed in my checked bag, I packed this A7C. This was my dedicated time-lapse camera. This one I just brought with a 128 gig card and a backup 64 gig card. The ZV-E one just had a 512 in it, which lasted the whole time. And I was just importing, but also leaving the cards alone. So that way everything would stay backed up. It would be on the card as well as a hard drive as I was traveling. And that was a good security safety net. But yeah, this A7C was strictly for time-lapse, which is awesome because I can just leave it set up, just mess with the exposure and the interval and let it go and continue to film with my ZV-E one while this was shooting a time-lapse. Because time-lapses, as you know, really take up a lot of time and space on your camera. So this one would sit on a tripod and shoot a time-lapse for 30 minutes to an hour, while my ZV-E one was on the gimbal or getting handheld footage, which really helped me be more efficient. And this guy, I just threw in a lens wrap, one of these little 10-bit lens wraps, and just surrounded it with my clothes so it was safe. And then I just took the battery out so that there was no battery in there when it was going under the plane. And then another couple of things that I brought that were either in my girlfriend's bag or in my check bag. This one was in my girlfriend's bag. This was a small rig V-mount battery. It's a 99 watt-hour battery, which is the maximum capacity I believe you can bring. And this was actually really clutch to have because we didn't have a lot of Aussie adapters or like the plug adapters. So we would sometimes just charge this guy up and then just use the USB-C or the USB-A to charge up any of our other devices via USB-C or even our phones. And that's what allowed me to do things like flying the Mavic so much. I would just fly it down a little bit and then recharge it in the car with something like this. And it really kept us going all day. Okay, let's move this off to the side. So the one thing I haven't talked about that's hiding in here is this little hard drive case. So I actually brought with me, this is actually a really important point, is I brought this Samsung T7 to offload all of my footage. This is a 2 terabyte drive, and that way I made sure all my footage was backed up and good to go. And then I also had a couple of working drives in here in case I wanted to do some client work while I was on the go. I have some media from current projects. So that does it for everything that was in my carry-on bag. The next thing I want to talk about is a couple of things that I put in a checked bag just to save some space. And that was this GoPro case. So this just has the charger for my FPV drone. This is a 6S charger from Toolkit RC and the AC adapter for it, as well as a couple of GoPro accessories. I actually bought this one while I was away, the AC adapter, and it came with an Aussie plug, so that helped me out a little bit when I was over there. I was able to charge this without using an adapter, and then I also have like my GoPro tripod and some little clamps if I want to use my GoPro. There's a couple things that I didn't bring that I kind of wish I had brought, like some small clamps and stuff, but I could do a separate video about that. More so for like city traveling, I like being able to mount the time-lapse camera places, and I felt like I was missing out by not having like a suction cup mount or like a little small rig clamp to clamp onto a railing of like a train or a car or anything like that. This is just another pouch that I brought with me from GoPro, and it just had some chargers and extra cables. But yeah, I like keeping it all compartmentalized so that everything stays with its package. So there's a GoPro charger, extra cable for my charger, and then a drone charger, as well as a micro USB cable and a USB-C to USB-A adapter. And then these are just extra FPV parts, some extra screws and cables in case anything happens with my FPV drone. But yeah, I'm excited to try out this new core unit and see how it changes my workflow with my bag. So yeah, that's all I brought with me. If you guys have any questions about any of the particular items, there's a few things I can talk a little bit more in depth about. I just wanted to make this video because I know it's really difficult to figure out what you should bring with you and what's kind of like you can leave behind and what's the most important, and how you can cut some corners to get away with bringing more and getting more variety out of your kit, and leaving some of the things back at home that you might not need. So yeah, leave me any questions you might have in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.